Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our online panel discussion with the topic Parliamentary Elections in Croatia. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome here Mr. Lorenz from the Politische Akademie in Vienna, Department for Think Tanks, as well as Nino PRELOŽNJAK from the Croatian Youth Network, and Tena professor for politics and economics at the sorry, I got just a second, London School of Economics, and as well Zrinka VRABEC-MOJZEŠ, journalist at the Croatian newspaper Nacional. Before I will start a short introduction into the political situation right now in Croatia, I will give you the word, Mr. Jan, to have some words in advance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you today on behalf of the Political Academy, as well as the EDM and the Renner-Institut, at this discussion on the parliamentary elections in Croatia. And I also want to send you all warm greetings from our president, Bettina Rausch. As the Political Academy, we focus our work on the countries of Southeastern Europe due to our historical ties and geographical proximity, regardless of whether we look into the distant past in which we were united by the Habsburg monarchy, or into the nearer past when Austria was one of the greatest international advocates of these countries after the collapse of Yugoslavia with Foreign Minister Alois Mock. We have always been close partners in Europe. In order to maintain and strengthen this bond, we must promote exchange and understanding between these countries. And it is therefore important to us that a series of discussions can provide insights into the political events and in the countries of Southeastern Europe, as well as Central Europe and parts of the Black Sea region. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all those involved in this series of events. We have been organizing these talks for some time now and have been able to continue it during the restrictions imposed by the measures against the coronavirus pandemic. Together, we have quickly and flexibly converted the series into an online format that is just as informative and exciting as the normal event was, besides the fact that 3 of our countries of interest decided to hold their elections within 4 weeks. I think that all partners are making a strong contribution here to provide high quality information. Thank you all for that. I'm also particularly pleased that since the beginning of the year, we have been able to offer an election briefing with each event. This briefing provides a good overview of all relevant information on the elections in compact form. With this, we create another great benefit for you. As I said before, the Western Balkans is the main focus of our international work at the Political Academy. We believe that the European Union will not be complete until these 6 states join the EU. And it is therefore important to us to create a deeper understanding of the region and to provide insights into politics on the ground. I am therefore delighted to be able to invite you warmly to our next joint event on the parliamentary elections in North Macedonia on the 13th of July. Now I wish us all an interesting discussion on the election of Croatia. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jan, for this welcoming words. Yes, and I will take over with this short introduction right now for you. Croatia joined the trend. Croatia joined the trend for snap elections in the region, and it is quite probably obvious that the real reason for that was that elections should be held before an economic crisis in the country caused by the coronavirus pandemic will fully kick in, and the HDZ, the currently governing party, decided to have the elections before this crisis can happen, so that they maybe will remain in power. So this is why the date of the 5th of July was chosen by Prime Minister Andrej Plenković and his government. But still, the public favor for his governing party is recently shrinking. this is due to many facts. For example, it wasn't only the coronavirus pandemic which stroked the Croatian state, as well as all the other countries in the region, but there was as well in the same time a devastating earthquake in which caused a lot of damage in the Croatian capital of Zagreb. And there's actually a quite big public dissatisfaction with the way this kind of catastrophe was handled. And some said that they will not forget the bad administration of HDZ and what it caused to the city of Zagreb. But there are many other coincidences that took place before that, also in political sphere. Zoran Milanovic is the new elected president of the Republic of Croatia. He is from the Social Democrat Party, and he succeeded Mrs. Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, who was from the Conservative Party. She became actually a little bit unpopular in both parts, let's say, in the society of Croatia, because on the one hand, she tried internationally to play the card of a very open person, a very, very fresh leader to the nation of Croatia, and tried also to satisfy the need for showing up at events like in Yad Vashem for the Holocaust memorial in Israel. But on the other hand, members of her staff were sent to the Austrian town of Bleiburg, where at the end of Second World War, soldiers of the fascist Ustasha movement were murdered, and which is now for ultra right-wing people in Croatia a kind of national shrine. Still, she disappointed this voter base, also on the far right, which actually tended more to vote for the HDZ. And this is also one cause why, for example, the HDZ is, while it got into this transition under Andrej Plenković to become a more modern center-right party, this base, this part of the voter base is now, right now, drifting away. And still, the accession to the European Union did not deliver actually economically what the Croatian society was expecting. So there was not tremendous rise in the country's GDP, and this is why the young people are voting right now with their feet, which is actually also a trend in the entire region. So young people take the chance with their new acquired visa-free movement in Europe and are leaving the country. For example, mostly to Ireland, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And there are as well other reasons for this EU skepticism, because, for example, when Croatia, before Croatia ascended the European Union, Zoran Milanovic, who was back then Prime Minister of the Republic of Croatia, decided to settle a political issue with Slovenia in a way that did not get him in favor of the public. The word is about the so-called Ljubljana Bank, Banka Ljubljana, which actually just closed down in the beginning of the Yugoslavian crisis and did not pay out all the savings Croatian citizens had at this bank. Zoran Milanovic decided back then to settle the issue by signing a contract with Janša back in the early 2000s to not further pursue a possible payback for these Croatian citizens. There's also as well the case of the so-called Agrokor, which was a very big company in agriculture, and which was struck by corruption with the involvement of President Ivo Sanader, HDZ, who actually got deeply involved in this. Andrej Plenković pledged to reform the HDZ, to get rid of corruption, to improve the social standards for the citizens of Croatia, but yet just little had realized of this promises. I will show you right now some sheets that I prepared to show you the election results from I'm sorry. From 2016. So these were the 2016 parliamentary elections in Croatia results. As you can see, the HDZ got 36% and got into coalition with MOST. If you're interested, here you see the abbreviations below this graphic, which party for what the abbreviation stands for. So HDZ is the conservative center-right party connected to the European People's Party. Then you have Croatia Grows. Actually, was a coalition, or still is a coalition, just has another name, which is led by the Social Democrat Party of Croatia and is center-left. This small party with 9%, or rather small party, MOST, which translates into bridge, is actually center-right liberal, and was in the end the kingmaker. So there were coalition talks between Croatia Grows and MOST, but MOST did not get into an agreement with Croatia Grows and decided to join forces with the HDZ. So this is the polling for right now. The source is Promocija Plus, as you can see on the right corner. There are many other predictions, but actually they are very similar in the outcome. So you have the Restart Coalition, just as Croatia Grows right now is called, seems to be able to get the biggest share in voter favor. But the situation gets just more difficult, as you can see, because right now MOST will not be able to probably to get over the 5% threshold to enter the Croatian parliament, the Sabor. But a new party, the DPMŠ, the so-called Domovinski Pokret, or Homeland Movement, a far-right party consisting of members of the HDZ who were pretty nationalist, but decided after the reforms of Andrej Plenković to leave the party and form their own bloc, would most probably be able to get almost 14% of voter share, which is a very, very interesting but also frightening situation, because this would mean that HDZ can actually stay in the government when they get into a coalition with this Homeland Movement. So, and right now, I thank you very much. And I will give the word first to Ms. Tena Prelec from the London School of Economics to tell us, to give us a more deeper insight into the current socio-economic and political situation in Croatia. Thank you very much, you all, for joining us, and let's have a very fruitful discussion. So, please, Tena.
Thank you very much, Lucas, for setting out the scene and for this lovely introduction. For correctness sake, I need to point out that I'm not a professor yet. I'm just a humble research fellow at the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Oxford, and I'm also an associate of the research unit on the Balkans of the LSEE. Can you hear me okay? Because I can see the sound coming back. Is it fine?
Yeah, it's a little bit interrupting, probably.
Okay, let's try again. Is it better? Again now? Is that better?
Yes, that is better.
Okay.
Yeah.
We cracked it. All right. So without further ado, I will talk about something that I see as a trend in Croatian politics, also beyond this election here. And this trend that I see specifically in electoral politics in Croatia is that is this attempt and failure at the same time to get out of the mainstream. Meaning that I think we can notice from the voting patterns that voters have been trying to get out of a binary choice of two mainstream parties, the HDZ and the SDP, for quite a long while. And yet, again and again, it seems that the mainstream has managed to capture voters once again at the end, you know, in the electoral coalitions, etc., etc. So I'll talk a bit about that, and I'll talk also about why this time it might be slightly different and what that might mean. So as I said, you know, in several elections, also as from the graph that you showed for the 2016 elections, you can see that there was always like a third stronger contender. And apparently, like at first sight, you know, if you check who the strongest contender was, it was all over the place ideologically. Like, for instance, at a certain point, there was ORAH, which is a Green Party at the European Parliament elections in 2014 that gained a lot of votes. There was, you know, MOST, and in some ways, you know, the success of other parties like or figures like Škoro coming as third contender, or GVZ at a certain point, etc., etc. I think it can be noticed. It can sort of be explained in this framework that really Croatian voters are trying to find somebody else to vote for aside from HDZ and the SDP. So what are the reasons for this, and how may it be playing out this time? So first of all, I think it's clear that people by and large in Croatia do not really feel represented by politics. And this is clear, for instance, by the turnout, which is consistently low at elections in Croatia. Last time it was just above 50%. Let's see how it will be this time, because also this is a key issue in terms of the legitimacy of the elections, of course. And of course, you know, the problems with coronavirus makes it more complicated, because, I mean, it seems that it will not be compulsory to wear masks, but how can you ensure the safety of people to go to the polls without masks? So all this, you know, actually complicates matters. But in any case, you know, the turnout has been consistently low, so this tells us something. And also, I mean, another point that I would bring in here is the diaspora, the emigration. So as Lucas mentioned, this is definitely also linked to a certain extent to economic opportunities, meaning that people have been making use of the freedom of movement to go out of Croatia and move towards to other Western European countries mostly. But aside from economic reasons, actually, research studies have showed again and again that the number one reason for people to leave is really that they do not feel like there is a meritocratic system at home. They do not feel like they can, you know, make their way in Croatian society in a way that is fair and without pulling any strings. So maybe I'll tell an anecdote here, and it's that also, I mean, this is linked with the way the diaspora votes to some extent. The diaspora has been looked as, the Croatian diaspora usually votes for the right wing, and it has been perceived as linked to that option specifically. And when I try to motivate Croatian citizens living in the UK. Wait, let me. Okay, can you hear me well again?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I thought there was a problem again. So basically, I mean, it is to this extent, you know, this conception of the diaspora being very linked to the right wing makes it so that the new diaspora voters, so people who have been leaving the country recently, not only for economic reasons, but also because they don't feel anymore so represented by the dominant, you know, quite right-wing, stale, conservative, and clientelistic, really, trends in Croatian society that they see, they do not feel so represented, and they actively do not want to vote. So I've been attacked for telling people, look, these are the ways by which you can ensure that your voice is heard from the diaspora in Croatia. And they said, I don't want to participate in this, you know, corrupt way of voting, because the diaspora is something that does not represent me. So you can see that basically, at the end of the day, the reason why people are, you know, so kind of disillusioned with Croatian politics is partially, ideological, but also most of all, I think it's linked with this perception of clientelism and the lack of meritocracy. So now, coming back to this specific to this election, I think it's fair to remind that the HDZ, at least outwardly, it has been moving closer to a moderate axis on some ideological values. And this has taken the steam out of the SDP's of the SDP to a certain extent, and yet the Restart coalition, which is led by the SDP, is now faring first in the polls. I would say that this is most of all because of the HDZ's failure in certain respects. So since the announcement of the elections, they have done quite a lot of POFA, of mistakes. So first of all, the coronavirus response, it has started with a bang. So they have managed to quite successfully, I would say, stem the infection at the beginning. But several mistakes have been done at a later stage. So for instance, this tennis tournament in Zadar has been very much in the news. But in any case, it's incontrovertible that the levels of the infection are going up. And this is a problem. So I think this is the best indicator actually of the HDZ's popularity. The fact that when you ask people in polls if they agree with the direction the country is going towards, there has been an unprecedented surge of about people supporting the country's direction have been gone further than 50% at a certain point at the beginning of the coronavirus crisis, because they thought it was managed effectively. But now it has reached the levels before the crisis. So it has gone down again to about 20%. Other mistakes they've done, I think that Plenković has actually not learned anything from the way he won against Milanović in 2016, because Milanović in 2016, who was the leader of the SDP back then, was very arrogant and very top-down, over Plenković. And basically from the latest duel between Plenković and the leader of the SDP, we can see Bernabić, we can see that he's been using a similar type of approach. So there have been other types of mistakes, but I want we can discuss about that later on. You have also mentioned the very important issue of the mismanagement of the reconstruction of Zagreb after the earthquake. But in any case, I would say that the reason why the mainstream is still strong and quite clearly, the two bigger parties will still be so after the elections, the HDZ and SDP, is that of course they have this institutional advantage. But on the other hand, as you've noticed, as you've showed us earlier, we see this surge on the right of Škoro and his coalition. Now, what I would say here that is important to point out is that I do not believe that the coalition led by Miroslav Škoro is that their main target is creating a strong right-wing party, but rather that it's taking over the HDZ and bringing it back to a far-right type of further right type of party. So we can discuss that later. Whereas on the left, we have some smaller parties, but I would say that some of them have managed to capture the zeitgeist of some of these grievances that I was mentioning earlier. So it will be interesting to see how far these new parties will reach at these elections. So as a net result, I think the Croatian electorate is still looking for a way out of this bipolarism, for a third, a fourth, fifth way out. It's not totally there, but it's sort of going there. And I do think that, that basically the main result of this election will be that the real battle will be after the elections, when we will see how, how everything will turn out in terms of the coalition, and that this might open up opportunities also for new experiments. For the first time ever, except for a small, maybe 1991 experiment, there is actually the possibility that the option of the Grand Coalition might also be taken into consideration. So this will be interesting. And I'll finish just with two elements, one which I find very dispiriting and one which I find encouraging of these elections. The dispiriting, or rather the disgraceful thing, is the topic of women's rights and women's body really being used and abused during this election. I mean, honestly, I find it something that is completely out of place in 2020, and something that some parties, you know, including SCHUBERT and MOST, which is very much not a centrist party anymore, by the way, but it's very much a right-wing party ideologically, have been trying to look for easy topics to manipulate the electorate, and I do hope that this will not play out well for them, because really it is very disgraceful. On the other hand, the encouraging thing that I would like to highlight is that for the first time ever, I think, we can see that some individuals who have long stood at the margins have had the courage to kind of stand up and to say, no, we are not going anywhere. We are actually taking action, and we are now going to, you know, be actors in Croatian politics and not just passive spectators. And I find this very important because it goes against this widespread perception, as I mentioned earlier, of politics as a dirty thing for Croatians, of politics as something that is only, you know, something that you wouldn't touch with a barge pole. So this will be marginal. I do think, you know, such options will be marginal at these elections, but I do hope that this approach and this attitude will stick around, and that we see more of it in the future. I will stop here now.
No problem. Thank you very much for these words. I just have something to add for our dear audience. You are free to ask questions, and we will, of course, addressing them later on. So feel free to write anything in the chat, and we will select your questions. So this was very enlightening, and I want to ask you, Zrinka, what do you perceive, for example, from the view of a journalist, from a free media journalist? How's the mood? How's the actually right now situation in the society? What kind of changes had there been, or is everything still the old and the same? Sorry, you have to activate your microphone.
Sorry. Does it work now?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thanks, Tena, for her introduction. I wouldn't agree with some of the things. This was a very general picture. First of all, I would say that HDZ never became, well, they were pretending that they were becoming a normal, civilized, conservative party, but their actual electorate is very far right. And this is the reason why they are so disappointed, and why they're afraid that actually their own electorate would give their votes to this homeland movement, the right-wing movement led by a singer and a showman. This is a trend in Europe. The other thing, which is the most important, is that actually this absolute abuse of Corona situation. And of course, I mean, it was the idea of the Prime Minister. He wanted to abuse high ratings that he had in April at the beginning of May, because of course people were frightened, they believed in institutions and blah blah. Actually can probably hit back into his head as a boomerang, because in the meantime many other things happened, and people are realizing that their only idea is to prevent actually a high turnout. What we know now is that turnout would be very low, that people, for example, from old people's homes, social institutions would not be able to vote. On the other hand, they suddenly opened borders with Herzegovina for so-called diaspora. We know that they are not diaspora. They are one of the constitutional nations in other states. So it's crazy that those people can vote in both countries, but never mind. And also what Tena did not mention were those actually how to explain those 5 years of governing of Andrej Plenković, who is one of the favorite members of so-called young members of European People's Party, is corruption and hypocrisy on one hand. And although these affairs were of course discovered by independent media, and there were latest two affairs which probably influenced lower ratings of his own party. The one is scandal about wind farm affair, in which one of high-ranking politicians, Josip Rimac, who was also mayor of Knin and of course member of the ruling party, participated, and she's in prison right now. And the other one is Ina. So as you know, Andrej Plenković has very close connections to Orban and his right-wing and populist party. And what we realized and what Nacional discovered that the Minister of Environment, Tomislav Ćorić, who was actually consignatory of the memorandum with MOL, directing Croatian oil to refineries in Hungary and Slovakia. Oh, so he was working against Croatian national interest. And you didn't mention a new green left central party, which has, according to the polls, I hope lots of chances to win at least 2 or 3 seats in the parliament. This is MOJEŠ. We can. And they're very strong in the capital and in some other urban areas in Croatia. And there are the third option. This moment, not Živi zid, not the Shield. They are the third option for those who are disappointed with Social Democrats, for those who, we don't have a real liberal civil party. We don't have it anymore because liberals, unfortunately, sold their souls to HDZ. But now we have MOJEŠ. They're very strong in Zagreb. And, well, when we look at the polls, we can see that actually Restart coalition led by Social Democrats, they're leading now. What they lack is their so-called coalition potential. But if MOJEŠ, which is the new green left party, and you also forgot about national minorities, they have 8 seats in the parliament, and they usually go with a winner. So they, of course, they protect the interest of minorities in Croatia. They go with the winner, and if some other small parties win at least 1 or 2 seats, probably we can prevent this huge coalition with far right. And this would be a real disaster for Croatia to have HDZ as so-called central Demo-Christian party and the far right party in a great coalition. This would be complete disaster, worse than corona crisis, economic crisis, whatever, which may expect Croatia. And the other thing which was not mentioned is this hypocrisy regarding historical revisionism. So we are playing with our fascist history. You mentioned Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, but this is exactly what the Prime Minister does. When he is in Europe, he's anti-fascist. When he comes back home, he is, he's not reacting to the legalization of Ustaša fascist salute, which is similar to Sieg Heil in Germany, Za dom spremni. Even our judiciary is legalizing that salute. And the ruling party is not reacting to complete fascization, neo-fascization of Croatian society. And maybe the most important thing, they were abusing Croatian so-called public television in their campaign. And none of the parties was mentioning media. Media were abused by the ruling party. It's not the topic. It used to be the topic in the 90s. We claim that situation with independent media is worse than it was in the 90s. So there are few topics which were not touched, but there is still hope that this so-called silent majority, who never turns out, will probably turn out as they did for presidential elections. Nobody expected Zoran Milanović to win. He won despite the polls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as we see, this is a very, very similar trend when it comes, for example, to media, with also with Serbia, where the word is of medijski mrak, which translates into medial darkness. Yeah, and always public stations are mostly becoming a voice of
Political
propaganda for the ruling party.
Yeah, political weapon. And, you know, they show not only in the news programs, there are suddenly ministers are in entertaining programs, magazines. I mean, we wrote a text about that. It's a huge percentage of media time abused by the ruling party before the campaign started. So they were very clever. Now they're not abusing it anymore that way because it's campaign. It would be so obvious. But before the campaign, when they knew that they would have early elections, they started to abuse it enormously. And I'm surprised that none of the oppositional parties ever mentioned that. They're not talking about that, which is a disappointment for us, of course.
So I would like to ask Nino PRELOŽNJAK.
Third speaker as well. Yes.
No problem. This is an open discussion we have. Nino, because you're actually working, you're the vice president of the Croatian Youth Network. Can you give us some, like, for example, an insight on how is the situation with the young people in Croatia, with the well-educated one, with the lesser educated one? What is their opinion on politics in the countries, and can there something be done to let's say a little bit diminish this trend of brain drain in Croatia?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me here to be in this panel discussion. So first of all, I'll just give you a brief overview of what we have done regarding the pre-election, this pre-election campaign and political parties and coalitions, and if they are tackling the issues of young people or not. So actually, what is happening that we have really decreasing number of young people who are participating in any kind of form of democracy processes. For example, also here in election, because their needs are not heard, so they are not heard well. Political parties in their programs are not tackling, like they don't have concrete measures or some kind of guidelines that will answer on their needs. And we can see, for example, we don't have measurement about how many young people were participating in the last parliamentary elections in Croatia, because our institution is not doing this. But actually, in the European parliamentary elections, we have just, I think, 18% of young people who participated. One of the reasons is that they are not attached to the European Union still, because we are like a young member of the European Union. But actually, the topics that are covered during the campaigns and actually in their programs are not tackling the issues of young people. So here we are talking about priorities for young people here, housing for young people, quality employment. So we also have ecological topics that are not tackling it in their programs. So we are still talking about Ustaša context, about history, and when we are talking about young generations, they cannot identify themselves with those kind of topics because they were not part of that. So I can say that there are some group of young people regarding also the education. For example, we can see the trends that high educated young people will give the votes to some center-left parties or coalitions. And for example, those with high schools will mostly give the votes to, for example, center-right or center coalition, something like that. So, yeah. But can you just actually repeat the questions once again?
Yes, the question was actually, is there also like a political possibility? Is there a possibility to change politics to be more in favor for young people and to give them an incentive to stay in Croatia? What should be done in this direction?
Yeah, research shows, for example, in 2019, there was a really comprehensive research done by Friedrich Ebert Stiftung together with the Institute for Social Research. and really quality researchers. And there are some of elements that can bring like quality participation of young people in democracy processes. First of all, we need to have like a civic education in schools that will be like really formal as a subject, not just as a side subject in the school. We need like also quality youth centers that will be like the spaces for youth to express themselves, to let's say practice democracy processes. For example, to have panel discussions, to develop critical thinking. So this is also part of civic education. But also programs and topics need to give answers on their needs. So nobody actually ask or make research like what are the actual needs of young people, or just take, for example, existing research and the results of this research and just to put it in their programs or give the answers on these results. So yeah, there are quite a few elements that can bring the more political participation of young people also in Croatia. Also here we can talk about a really huge migration of young people while entering European Union. So from 2013, because I think that system that we are living was not also like it was not quality also for young people. Because we have also high rate of youth unemployment. That was also one element why young people left the country, starting from 2013. And also we have absence of a structural education reform. So yeah, this is it.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have our first question, public question, which is rather long, and I would like to concentrate only on the
Is
last
it the one
part.
that we can see on the screen?
Yeah, I will just
okay,
show it to the whole audience. Just,
okay.
So because it's rather long, I would.
Yeah, I'm reading it. Yeah. Well,
So
about big coalition, yeah, probably, yeah. If I can say something, I mean, most already betrayed their partners twice. So I don't think that, yeah, they can get some seats, but people do not trust them. They started as central right, well, independent party, but now they prove to be very conservative and actually very, very right party. But nobody trusts them. So yeah, I think that this homeland movement will get most seats in Slavonia. And and I'm sure that Tena has this analysis. If you look at the electorate, then eastern and southern parts of Croatia with less educated people vote for those right-wing parties, which is obvious. Urban parts, southwest, Istria, the most developed parts usually vote for left or central left parties or regional, and we did not mention this regional IDS, Istrian Democratic Party, which is actually regional but left party. And well, yeah, I still think that there is no chance to have a big coalition between Social Democrats and HDZ because this would completely destroy Social Democrats. They're aware of that fact. If they want to prevent fascization of Croatia, probably yes, but then before that we'll have to repeat the elections. But something I would like to add about corruption, and this was, I think this is something that also worked against the ruling party. It's not that just that 11 ministers had to leave the government because they were accused for corruption, and the prime minister get rid of them only at the moment when he himself was endangered by public opinion. But also their coalition with a corrupted mayor of Zagreb, So the guy rules for the last 20 years. There is a number of processes against him. And actually, you know, all those processes were either postponed, never ended, or were stopped because somebody always needs his hands in the parliament. He started with 1 seat in the parliament. He ended with 12 seats, which means that he bought, it was a political trade, 11 members of the parliament. And this is the reason why people, not just young people, are so disappointed with the politics. They voted for something, and like, as you know, it's HNS, Hrvatska Narodna Stranka. They changed sides. They changed sides in the middle of when Plenković needed some more seats. So, you know, this is the reason why people are disappointed, and this is the reason why electorate, HDZ and SDP electorate is old. Young people don't want to vote, including my daughter, who is my 4th child, who is 18 now. She doesn't want to vote. It's her first time that she can vote. She doesn't want to because she doesn't see the purpose of it. And I'm sure that there are younger people here who can explain that.
Of course, yeah. Of course.
Yeah, I can agree. This is like partly true, but actually, what we also observed is that there are like new ways of making the impact. You know, like for example, generation Y and Z. So there are actually millennials who really want to make some impact on their society. And when we are talking about this kind of system, electoral system, it's like really conventional one, and it's really formal one, and with non-formal ways of making the impact. For example, petitions, so some kind of protests, online campaigning, and something like that is like, for example, I think 60-something% of young people really want to participate in this kind of democracy processes because they can make the impact. Here, they don't have like the representative, like what you also said. But actually, now I think that in Croatia, we are getting some kind of, for example, potential electoral representatives of young people who are actually tackling their issues. And I can say that a coalition MOJZEŠ, what you also actually mentioned, that is green left coalition. Yes. Yeah, and when we analyzed their program and compare it to the other programs, they have like, I think, the concrete measures or let's say guidelines to solve their problems.
Yes.
For example, how to tackle youth unemployment, how to tackle precarious work, like how to tackle housing for young people, also mentioning youth work, like what other parties are not mentioning, and that is
yes.
really like spread among the Europe. So, and this is like how you can get young people like with concrete topics that are really that they really matter to. So yeah, this is like just some kind of addition to your.
But they don't have the money to campaign. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So they can only campaign on networks and things, but they don't have the money for televisions. And now because of Corona crisis, they cannot go around Croatia and meet the people like our Prime Minister, who is supposed to be in self-isolation. This was one of the topic. He refused to do whatever everything else has to do, because he was in touch with Djokovic and Goran Ivanišević, who were Corona positive. And he doesn't want to go into self-isolation.
But he actually showed, I don't know.
Whatever other people can. Sorry. Yeah.
No problem.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No problem, please, Nino.
Yeah. But I don't know if you're watching in Monday or Sunday. That was like at the duel on television. Yeah. So he actually showed that he made the test coronavirus that it was like negative, you know. But yeah.
He should be in self-isolation.
Yeah,
of course.
So a number of things. In terms of prospects for Grand Coalition, it's very true that until now this was a no-go for the two parties, and especially for the SDP, because, you know, so as I mentioned earlier, if they're seen by most of the people as being two parts of the same coin, you know, the HDZ, SDP, etc., going together would sort of prove this prejudice, and it would detract even more voters from that. So until now, it was a no-go. I wouldn't be so sure that this time it won't be considered. I think, you know, it might for the first time actually come under consideration. Let's see. About most expelled from the government, I mean, that was the last time was in 2017 over the agricole crisis, and it was a very rude move by Plenković in which basically he got rid of Most and got in a part of HNS, which split in that moment. So it was this moment, I think it was sort of a also Faustian moment in which we saw Plenković, you know, coming out of this gray bureaucrat suit and somebody
being decisive in the wrong moment.
Sorry, what?
Yeah. Being decisive for the first time, but in the wrong moment.
No, I mean, at least, you know, until then, you had this, he could maintain this superficial outward impression of a bureaucrat, of a moderate, etc., etc. But then we really saw, you know, that that the way he's leading the country is much more kind of ruthless and to the point. So just reacting to some things that Zrinka kind of brought up earlier. So absolutely, you know, the corruption scandals of the HDZ, I hinted at that. I couldn't go into it in 15 minutes. Thank you for doing so. Absolutely, you know, the wind farm affair is just the latest in a long series, which unfortunately we've seen that it didn't really quite move the needle so much until now. So yeah, but definitely, you know, that was yet another thing that happened in this period from the announcement of the elections until now. MOJEŠ, absolutely, you know, thank you for speaking about them, etc. Of course, you know, with what I mentioned earlier about the new the new way of doing politics, as I was actually, you know, referring to them specifically. I didn't want to sound too partisan, but it is a quite inspiring way of doing politics, and I do hope it sticks around. Also, I would mention that they were instrumental in Zagreb city to really, you know, kind of keep a bandage on his toes. So them, along with the filmmaker Dario Juričan, who ran as a spoof candidate, the best campaign, spoof candidate ever for the presidential elections. They really kind of took the veil off of bandage, and his corruption to the bone has been exposed. So so kudos to them. I would say though, you know, that that it's a small criticism and kind of, you know, a way to improve. Like I am voting in the Rijeka region, Primorsko-Goranska Županija, and I mean on the list of the candidates here for MOJEŠ, there's only one person who doesn't even have a Twitter account. You know, and the others are from Radnička Fronta. They don't even have a bloody Twitter account. It's free, guys. You're putting yourself forward as a candidate. Just try to use these networks at the very least. Yeah. So small criticism. I would also say their song is amazing. It's just so cool. Check it out if you didn't yet. It's so it is nice that new options are springing up. Let's see how it plays out. In terms of the media, you know, I would say that yes, there's a big problem with the media, and I would agree that. That the situation is the worst in the past 10 years, specifically
20.
Yeah, but specifically for the public broadcaster, for HRT. The huge issue in Croatia is the slap suit.
Yes, this is what I said. It was absolute abuse. So
basically, you know, this is like the huge issue. On the other hand, I would say that it's also encouraging that some web portals are springing up. Of course, again, not a massive reach with the electorate at large, but, you know, kind of making inroads with the younger population. You know, Telegram, certain point, Stand Index, etc., etc. So these guys, these small outlets, have managed to, in really impossible situations, to unearth such a big amount of crazy, you know, corruption scandals. This is remarkable. It's really resilient.
Don't forget Nacional. We started all these things. Yes.
No, Nacional,
I think that we were. That credit goes for us for many affairs. Yes, Nacional.
Definitely. No, Nacional has been instrumental in many things, also in the energy and Karamarko, etc., etc. But I do have a question for you, Zrinka, in that respect. So we've seen, like Index has covered it, that, you know, there was a secret meeting between Plenković and the editors-in-chief of most of the media in Croatia. So it's not only Nacional, but I mean, the Nacional editor-in-chief was present at that meeting, at which it seems that it was discussed, you know, how to cover the coronavirus crisis in a favorable way. So I wanted to ask you, you know, since you're there, can you tell us a bit more what was discussed at that meeting and what's the fuss all about?
I'm not editor-in-chief. I was editor-in-chief of Radio 101. I'm here just a journalist and a columnist. I wasn't there. But actually, the way we covered this crisis, I think it was very transparent. So when it was important not to spread panic, I think we did our job. But on the other hand, we started to criticize this so-called National Crisis Committee, led by the Minister of Interior and the Minister of Health and epidemiologists, because we thought that in the first month they did a great job. And later on, they started to be politically instrumentalized. And now they're politically abused for this, for election purposes. So the moment they started to be politically abused, we started to criticize. So don't worry about us. We were not spreading panic.
No, I know,
but at the same time, we started to criticize the moment that HDZ started to abuse epidemiologists and medical professionals for their own purposes. And we are terribly sorry that those people who are very good in their professions actually let them do it, accepted that roles. I'm sorry for that, because we really, their credibility among general public was very high, and people really trusted them. If you look at the rates, as you said, in March, April, beginning of May, people really trusted them. And then when the pre-campaign started, we realized that actually they were abused by the ruling party. And unluckily, most of the members of this committee are the members of the ruling party. Like, there are no doctors in Social Democrats or Liberals or wherever. All the doctors come from the ruling party, unfortunately.
That is very interesting, because as well as like in Serbia, there's a pattern. So this mediocrity ruling and this nepotism, which is like actually infecting the whole society. Is this problem as prevalent as it is in Serbia, for example, in Croatia? Is it also only possible to get some certain jobs only if you are a member of the ruling party, like having
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. This is the reason why they become a member. Look, Karlo Ressler, who was well, we didn't talk about Croatian presidency over the EU because it was almost invisible. Although Plenković counted on that as one of his credits for the elections, but it was coronavirus crisis and Croatian presidency was completely invisible. But you know, Karlo Ressler is one of the examples. He became member when he was very young, and then he was leading the list for the European Parliament. And I don't think that this guy has any ideals or that he believes in any kind of politics. His only ambition was to get to become a member of the European Parliament. If you want to get a job, yes, and you're 25, you will join the HDZ or HNS or some other party. Social Democrats are not so good in that, because although everybody are accusing both parties that they're both guilty for the situation that Croatia is in right now, 25 years after our independence, well, I have to remind that Social Democrats were in power only twice. They were not corrupted, they were just incapable. So this is their sin. So, you know, that was the problem. They did not punish corruption during their terms. And now they have a very young president, and his problem is that nobody believes that he's the real leader. But I would agree with what Tena said, that Plenković in this duel was so arrogant that although Bernardić we don't perceive him as a leader, because he was not arrogant, he was much more modest. He came to this show with lots of papers and, you know, trying to search for some data for arguments. I think that people liked him more because Plenković is so full of himself, and he's a very good European bureaucrat. He's a diplomat. He's not a politician. And probably privately, he's anti-fascist, but at home, he's doing everything to attract the far right and those who are actually nationalistic and Ustasha nostalgic. Let's put it in a modest way.
Nino, so is this this is also driving people out of Croatia then probably? So as far as we saw it, like either you have to become like a member of a party to get a certain job or something because it helps you in your career, or you say, no, I don't want this, I leave the country all the way. Is this too simple, or is this an accurate picture?
It could be, yeah, but we can see, for example, from the research also that has made that there are some trends that are changing. For example, for young people, of course, and also it depends, like if you're working in public sector or if you're working in private sector, or if you're working also in NGOs or civic sector. So it really depends. Yes, of course, this is also one of the reasons why young people are leaving the country, because there's still a high level of corruption and nepotism. We can see, for example, that Transparency International still put Croatia like at the end of the list of the European Union when talking about the corruption, because there's, for example, if you see like 5 years, 6 years ago, nothing is changing actually regarding this rank. But
yeah,
worse. Sorry?
Yeah, worse. We became worse in the meantime.
Yeah, I don't know like what was the situation with Bulgaria now, but actually like we are competing with Bulgaria and Romania all the time regarding the corruption and nepotism. Okay. So, and we are not moving from this, yeah, unfortunately. So, but yeah, I think it depends. There are a few elements. There are some trends that are changing that young people think that their capability is like the most important thing, and their skills are most important thing while entering the labor market and getting the jobs. It's not like if you have some network, something like that. But actually, I think that while they are searching for a job, while they're entering, they feel that the reality is like a little bit different. You know, this is like what the research is when you're asking high schoolers and students, but actually they are not working, so they will not enter a labor market and feel like what was the like reality there for getting the job. But there are also some elements. I just want to refer on some elements why young people are leaving the country from 2013. So it's really a political situation. What we actually said, corruption and value system that is still existing in Croatia. There's also high rate of unemployment still for young people. It's really higher rate than general population. There's also what I have said, absence of structural education reform, inability to find quality job. You really need to wait too long to find the quality job that is linked to your profession. So you have a lot of young people that are, for example, they graduate or something like that, but they are working, you know, during the season, some low quality jobs, etc., and inadequate salary regarding their qualifications. So that are the reasons, and also opinion that, for example, Western European countries have quality life, so better life than and better life expectation than in our region. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I have a very interesting question from the audience. I will just show it to you, and it comes from
civic education.
Yes. Is politics or civic education taught in schools, and how the legacies of the Homeland War addressed in school? What are the relations to the Croat Serbs in Croatia? So was it also visible?
Very good question.
Mm.
Very good question. I'll just tell Tena would probably say more, but this is something that we were writing a lot about. No, civic education was meant to become a special subject, a separate subject in a new curriculum during the last government led by Zoran Milanovic. Curriculum was, of course, I mean, it was a subject of many debates, and what we didn't mention, none of us, is the role of Catholic Church, which is very important. And they started their propaganda. They actually draw a party that believers and religious people should vote for. They didn't name it, but they said it. And they also intervened into all the attempts of reform of educational system. So what I'm not, okay, I respect them, but I can even understand why they didn't want to introduce so-called sexual education in schools because of their reasons. But what's wrong with civic education? I think that religious people too should know about their civic rights, about how the state operates. It's not introduced, it's part of different subjects. It's so-called interdisciplinary, and actually it depends on the goodwill of the teachers. There are two towns, Rijeka is one and Sisak is the other, where I think it was introduced as a subject, but you can take it voluntarily. It's not obligatory. But there are two, and why? Because in Sisak and in Rijeka, mayors come from Social Democratic Party. When it comes to Croatian Serbs, yes, we had explosions of nationalism, of hate speech, of graffiti, everything. It was just something that we expected before the elections. And of course that Mr. Pupovac, who is the leader of Croatian Serbian Parliamentary Party, is always guilty for everything. And he even made a promotion TV advert saying, yes, I'm guilty for everything now. You know, you can accuse me. It was a good one. Yes.
Yeah, I saw it. It was with this.
Yeah, it was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. In the end, there was this combination of his letters, and it comes
Blame
out.
me. It's me.
Yes. Even that the sum of his the letters of his name combined is Ch, which stands for Chetnik.
Yeah. It was very good.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm guilty because all the Croatian youngsters are going to Belgrade to listen to this horrible folk music. Yes, I'm to blame for it. Yeah.
Here's the reason.
It was good.
And that he was spreading coronavirus. Yes, by that.
Yeah. So it's a good one.
What is your... Yeah.
Sure,
yeah.
I can react on some of this. So thank you, Zrinka, for covering the part about the civic education, a very important point indeed. And there were many controversies about education in general in Croatia. So that is an important point, still unsolved. Like there is no proper way to tackle these issues in the upbringing of youngsters. It's super important. I wanted to react to Erhard's question about the role of Europe, Balkans, and foreign politics in the campaign, which is true we haven't touched upon so far. So
just a moment, Tena. I would like to show the question to the public.
Yeah.
Just that I'm sorry for interrupting. Just that the audience is informed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a good point, but you know, basically it wasn't dominant. But okay, let me go into it. So my opinion is that actually Croatian public opinion as a whole is not, like, Euroscepticism does not play a big role. I mean, these are questions that Western political scientists have been asking over and over again, like which part is Eurosceptic, which one is not. My opinion is that they are Eurosceptic only insofar as it serves their immediate political goals. It's more a practical way of being Eurosceptic rather than like some sort of value base or something. And I'll explain. So basically the mainstream in Croatia is sort of, you know, unitarily pro-EU, pro the EU sort of path of Croatia, especially like HDZ this is clear and clear. You know, they're really the lapdog of the EPP, of the, you know, right-wing group in the European Parliament in the country. I mean, they really do, you know, fall in line with whatever they say. They dare not, for instance, you know, criticize Orban, whereas a lot of other countries did. This is also partially due to the complicated issues in energy in Croatia. But in general, like, you know, whatever the EPP's line is, this is carried out by the HDZ very, very strongly in Croatia. And this is, you know, the fact that the HDZ especially, but the mainstream in general, is perceived as being very much, you know, in line with the EU and kind of in line with the you know, big capital and these this kind of neoliberal, you know, maybe issues. It has opened, you know, kind of a political topic for other countries to exploit and to challenge the mainstream on that. So once upon a time, there was this GVZ, you know, that made a bit of headlines with that. Now also Most has some Eurosceptic views, of course, you know, Shkorov on this hand. But I mean, if you watch the debate yesterday, you know, they all rally against stuff that the EU has done and the way EU funds are implemented in Croatia and stuff like that. But they all want the EU's money at the end. You know, none of them is saying we need to get out of the EU. They're all saying we want the EU's money. But like the EU is bad for these reasons. And I mean, in my opinion, you know, in my analysis, it's more like a way of carving for themselves a niche and exploiting some grievances politically, rather than something that is very, very strongly radicated in the you know, in the population, something that is very strongly felt as a value. I would also mention a certain, you know, hypocrisy of the HDZ on that front of being very anti-EU and, you know, nominally pro-EU and nominally kind of anti-Russia, because Russia is kind of, you know, the patron of Serbia in the very simplistic type of explanation. Because also, again, you know, when you look slightly beneath the surface, I mean, some of the links that Nacional has exposed, you know, between Karamarko and Russians in energy, or for instance, the PPD, you know, this this company that made the biggest, it has the highest growth in the whole of Croatia, this private company that has...
Just sorry to interrupt, they are behind this homeland movement. They are financing homeland movement. So it's the same group.
It's the same pattern. Before they financed HDZ, now they finance the far right. So you see, you know, this huge hypocrisy of the right wing in Croatia in theory being, you know, anti-Russia, anti what is East, anti-Serbs, anti-Russia, etc., and in fact getting the money, because of course, you know, the game of Russia is, as usual, as always, kind of divide and conquer, you know, like it's sort of, it goes on both ways. Also, they have been, I think there are links between, you know, them and Ivan Pernar, for instance, which was another hand. So that's as far as the EU is concerned. In terms of the Balkans, so the Balkans have been a bit of a topic because of the the first presidency of the EU Council that Croatia has held from January to June this year. And like sort of the clue moment of this presidency was supposed to be the Zagreb summit in May.
Which did not happen.
Which happened only virtually, yes. So the fact that it happened virtually was like the only positive thing. But, you know, in fact, like the wins were achieved beforehand. The fact that North Macedonia and Albania finally got the green light to enter and to start accession negotiations that was agreed beforehand. It was a long path until then. And there weren't really big inroads, you know, big headlines in that respect. So it was a bit of a whimper, once again, I would say, for, you know, the HDZ's policy of making out of this EU presidency a big success. I mean, I'm sorry to say, because in a way, it's, I would say they did put a lot of effort in, you know, creating capacity for this to happen. But then for various reasons, it wasn't such a big thing. And I mean, in terms of the Serbian minority, you know, Zrinka has already replied to you. And luckily, there are a lot of incidents. And again, I think it's, you know, it's really much of it's to do with political manipulation rather than something that is really felt among the population. But it's undeniable. It's still something we need to, you know, to deal with in Croatia. Yeah.
I would like to ask Nino, how's xenophobic or anti-minority sentiment around young people in Croatia? Is this like something that is more isolated to football hooliganism and so on, or is this something that is maybe widespread?
Actually, it is not. It is still present, you know, also within the young population. For example, we can also see the trends from 2015 opened me with the research. With also one organization that made a research with Institute for Social Research. When we see the trends that young people, actually 40% of young people are going towards right center, you know, this kind of opinion, and towards xenophobic attitudes. So I'm not sure if we have like decreasing trends now regarding that, but we had also some kind of incidents also in the southern part of Croatia, but actually in Zagreb with kako se kaže navijačka skupina? Sorry.
Football hooligans.
Yeah, with football hooligans. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, we had some incidents. So we cannot say, but actually we have this on the we have this opposite also groups who are tackling those kind of issues and who are fighting and protesting those kind of xenophobic incidents.
This is quite alarming, actually. Yeah.
It is. I just want, can I add some, because I know that Mr. Busek has been helping us with media situation for more than 20 years. And just to prove the connections between, I mean, they always claim it's a public media service, which of course is not. It's the state-controlled, party-controlled television. And just, you know, to give you two examples, editor of the biggest part of morning and afternoon programs is the mother of the spokesman of the government. The editor of all the news programs on radio and television is the wife of the chief of secret services in Zagreb. And they call ministers to ask them what to do. Croatian television journalists are forbidden from asking questions, nasty questions to the ruling party. Most of them are prevented from work. So they receive their salaries, but they cannot work. So there are hundreds of people just walking around. They cannot fire them because, you know, it's against the law. They still need them. But instead of that, they hire some people from somewhere else who do whatever the ruling party wants. And nobody is criticizing the situation. And it's the same like with Hungary. Why? Because Croatia is the member of the European Union. If we were not the member of the European Union, there would be monitoring. Somebody would tell us, would warn us, don't do that. I know, and this is the reason why influence of Croatian public television is diminishing, and why, for example, the president did not want to go to debate to the public television, and why the leader of the opposition refused to contribute in this pre-election debate on public television, because he was invited by the prime minister. He was not invited by editor-in-chief of Croatian television, by the prime minister. And he said, are you editor-in-chief of public television? Why don't they invite me? In this case, if you invite me, I refuse to go. So this is the situation. I think that since the time we became the member of the European Union, human rights situation and media situation is just going backwards, and nobody cares because we're a member.
Because all the leverage the European Union has is diminishing when a country becomes a member, unfortunately.
Yes.
So and I just want to add, because for example, I was also having a look on how is there any media coverage like in other countries of the European Union about the situation in Croatia, and I almost found nothing speaking about media and media freedom in Croatia, except one small podcast by the German Deutschlandfunk from a journalist who was an exchange for half a year in HRK, and what she described there was unimaginable, really, seriously, to say the least. But no one hears about that in the European Union.
It's not a topic.
Yeah. So we are like very, let's say, in some minutes coming to an end with our event. But I want to take the chance and to ask you, what is for you the future? What are for you the future developments and how is the outlook on the future for Croatia after these elections? Maybe I would start again with Tena to tell us her view or her expectations, her maybe also what she's afraid of, what could happen. And
yeah, I am afraid of. I'm afraid of Gilead, you know, taking over Croatia. That would be quite scary. And it's an option, to be honest. I mean, yeah, as we see, you know, this far right coalition is, in terms of numbers, it's possible. So that is something that that could happen, and that it's quite scary. I mean, you know, I already said that it will be very interesting what happens after the elections, and it will be interesting to see also once again, you know, the number of people who switch teams at that point. As we know, this is quite a tradition in Croatia, like which has been perfected by the mayor of Zagreb, Milan Bandic, who managed to get like, I think 11, if I'm not mistaken, or even more, you know, and
12.
Well, there you go, from one side to the other. So it will be interesting to see how things play out later. I think there will be quite a lot of political drama, and I don't think that, you know, that we could exclude completely some options. I mean, unluckily, I don't see the numbers for, you know, for something more sane than a far right. I mean, you know, for something on the left, I don't. As for now, I can't see how it could happen, but let's see. I mean, you know, in Portugal it did happen, so who knows? In Spain to a certain extent. On the other hand, again, you know, I think we should keep our eyes peeled for the potential of a grand coalition, but also like how long will it last? You know, so one question is what will the government that comes out of this, and the second one is how long will this government actually be sustainable? Maybe we'll see some further development soon, you know, going further down the line. And the last thing, you know, just to try to end on a positive note, at least this Sunday in Croatia, I think everybody has, you know, somebody to vote for, meaning, you know, at least there is a wide range of parties running, and at least the outcome is not decided in advance as we've seen in some neighboring countries. Wink, wink, Serbia. Yeah.
Yeah. Zrinka, what is your prognosis, let's say, and what would happen like in the best case scenario, and what is maybe the worst case scenario, up to your opinion?
It's very hard to say, as Tena said, and I think I'm very much afraid of the turnout because it's summer. Young people are not interested. Old people are afraid. People in institutions wouldn't be able to vote. So the turnout probably by some, well, I would like to be pleasantly surprised, but by some analysis, it would be much less than 50%. In that case, the right-wing parties always win. On the other hand, I don't believe in big coalition of Social Democrats and HDZ unless we had to repeat the elections. Because Davor Bernardic would not survive as a leader of Social Democrats if he accepts this great coalition immediately. And yes, there is the greatest possibility is of this huge coalition with the far right. But if they insist on their condition that Andrej Plenković shouldn't be a prime minister, and this was one of their conditions, we will go into coalition, but we don't want Andrej Plenković as a prime minister. In that case, there would be no coalition. In that case, we would have new elections. So I don't know. What I know is that we have no tourist season, that Croatia did not get out from the latest recession. We are just running into new recession and economic crisis. We need a new stable government, and I'm not sure that we will have it by the end of this year. I'm not very optimistic. And of course, I mean, there was no campaign for people to vote, like the one that we spoke about for Aleksandar Vučić, who is a dictator, but he has a very creative team, and his adverts to invite people to vote was remarkable. It's genius. Nobody made such a thing in Croatia. So I'm not optimistic.
Thank you. And Nino, how's from your point of view, what is the future up to bring after the elections for Croatia and Croatian youth, for example?
Yeah. So usually I'm a really optimistic person, but actually when I saw the results of this pre-election service, I cannot say that we will have the change of the government. Maybe some things will change regarding the coalition, but actually if we saw the results of pre-election service, we can see that relative winner will be Restart coalition, but actually they don't have this quality and a really strong potential for coalition with other center left or green left wing parties. So if we still have this government that is still now, and if they will continue with their work like they did in previous minute and regarding the young people, we cannot say that we will have the change, because actually when we made the analyze how they're approaching towards young people's problems and towards young people in general, it was, I don't know if you know this Roger Hart's letter. So it's there are like eight ranks of involving the young people for political participation. Here, for example, if we say that number 8 is like the highest level of participation of young people, in Croatia now we have number 3, so it's tokenism. So it's not like, you know, putting young people in front of you just to, you know, show them, but actually not giving them like the opportunity to actually make some decisions or give the ideas for making the changes, or involving them in creating the policy measures or actually public policies. So yeah, I'm not optimistic about that, but actually I hope that we'll have the opportunity as a Croatian Youth Network, so the National Youth Council, and our role is like to advocate for quality youth policies and quality youth programs, and I hope that we'll have the opportunity to make some impact on the government. Actually, as the member of the European Union, we really need to involve more those kind of platforms that are representing not just young people but also youth and for youth organizations, and to really make some changes, because actually what we have is a team that is really making analysis, you know, and is tracking, you know, all the policy measures regarding the young people. So we have know-how here, but actually we also need this moment of someone that someone is hearing what we are saying, you know. So yeah, I hope that we will have this opportunity after the elections, even if we will have this government that didn't have, you know, the will to do that till now.
Yeah. I definitely see your point. I mean, this distorted media situation also doesn't make it easier for you, let's say.
Yeah, actually, if I can just add one thing, is that if you see media coverage and, you know, the representing young people in media is like blaming them for expansion of COVID. I don't know if you saw this, like young people are, you know, it's their fault that we have now the spreading coronavirus again. So it's not like really a good situation for young people also in the media. So
okay,
we hope for more affirmative, you know, approach of media also for young people. It will motivate them to maybe to engage more, you know, in political processes or any kind of other processes.
Of course, I see. Yes, I would like to thank you very much. This was a very enlightening discussion, and it just shows that some things always, or most often, stay the same, even though the name of the party changes, which is very, I think, an observable phenomenon when it comes to Southeastern Europe, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So there is still a lot of political work to be done. So thank you very much, Lorenz, who had his introduction. Thank you very much for your contributions. These were like really good insights, really enlightening. And I hope to see you soon. at the IDM, and you for the audience. Thank you very much for joining us and showing interest into this online event. And I just want to remember again that there will be another online panel discussion on the elections in Northern Macedonia.
Macedonia. Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good luck.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
Bye.